Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson.
I'm Carson Grubaugh.
And I'm Brandon Graham.
How you doing, Brandon?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for asking.
None
Thinking
of us ever
about
seem to wash or change our clothes. This is distressing.
Not important. We're characters that live in people's computers.
yeah, exactly right. Well, I mean, what do you do? I mean, what do you change the bedding of the mouse that runs your refrigerator for you?
I mean, it would be nice.
You know, when like Shaggy or Charlie Brown, they change the color of their shirts, and it's this like huge, like oh my god, Charlie Brown's shirt is red now. Like up is down, down is up. Nothing means anything in the world anymore.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Junji Ito shirts forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I got a whole box of these. I did a drawing for someone, and they just sent me a box of these things. So I have I could wear one for every day of the week probably.
Are they identical?
No, they're all different. I had a sweater.
Oh,
I was in like Vegas heat. I was walking around in a Junji Ito sweater like an idiot yesterday.
I think walking around Vegas in a sweater is a Junji Ito comic.
Yeah.
Sweater man.
Come walk around in Alabama in your sweater, and then we'll talk.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, Vegas is as close to the sun as I would like to get.
Yeah. It's probably like way hotter but drier, I would imagine. Desert.
Yeah, it's very dry here.
What's the highest temperature you get?
I don't know.
You guys get to like
110. It doesn't impress me, and I live across from a swimming pool that I go to every day, so it isn't that
Okay.
horrible for me.
Back in California, we'd get to like 115, 116 where I lived.
Brandon, what are you going to do when you can't hop the gate to the swimming pool anymore?
That's a good question. When age takes me and I can no longer hop the,
I'll get one of those specialty walkers that has like a grappling hook on it.
Yeah, and it's a gadget walker. I mean, hopefully my interns will be able to lift me by then.
They've been weight training.
Yeah.
So we were just talking a little bit before we started about talking directionality. When we were talking to Ken Matroni, we were kind of secretly interrogating him about directionality in comics and directionality in film. And I have never been totally persuaded that directionality works the same way in film as it does in comics. But for comics, for me, it's like super central, like action moving the direction of the reading experience seems faster, and action moving against the reading experience typically seems slower to me, and it definitely feels oppositional as a sort of default position. But I know not everybody sees things that way. Would you say that you're you're fairly directional, Brandon?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue against because you're going that direction. It's like it'd be like pushing against the flow of a river to have somebody, to convince someone that running to the left was as fast. Reminds me of there's an artist who was telling me that they always try to have doors opening on page turns, and how that adds a little bit more of the reader having to actively open something when the characters are opening something.
An interactive element to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
And I know Hergé, when he was redrawing some Tintins, he would actually change everything that he did where the characters were running against the reading direction back towards the reading direction.
Like he had just not thought about that earlier in his career and went back and flipped it later.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you could see why people sometimes fudge it because of like balloon placement or, like just a general like maintenance of objects and how you're going to put them in the space. But it always feels, it feels like you're stopping something. But yeah, so one of the things we were kind of interrogating with Ken is just this solely because of the reading direction? And if there's some kind of actual bias, is it based just in somebody's background, like they're learning how to read background?
Yeah, I was wondering, it did make me think that because there's kind of a zigzag of reading comics too. So I bet you could do running that direction and then going this direction to kind of get back to the next row of panels. I feel like that could work well, because I was thinking you could easily do a full page spread and just having the characters zigzag over it and having them connect with different parts of the page.
Well, there's a lot of
nice thing about comics is there's so many workarounds where you could probably break every rule we could come up with.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the Dart. You said the name of this comic is Dart, Brandon?
Oh no, it's Rabbit Head, I think is what we're
Rabbit Head.
Right.
Right. And
Rebecca Dart is the artist.
Rebecca Dart. I'm sorry. Yeah. And
But I
so
also think we can get some examples of like people moving around a house. I think I have some examples like that where, like Brandon, you talk about, it's like a stable image and the character moves across it in a zigzag pattern.
like the Gasoline Alley Sundays.
Yeah, there's stuff like that.
Like Walton Skizik's walking through fall, or there's like seasonal change. Gasoline Alley ones.
Yeah, so I think this was published by Alternative Comics in the early 2000s, and Rebecca, who drew this, is she's one of the main artists on the My Little Pony cartoon up in Vancouver, BC.
Fantastic art.
Yeah, and her husband is this guy Robin Bougie, who does the Cinema Sewer books. Who's too.
I didn't know that they were. Okay, wow, that's fantastic.
So the back and forth between their stuff is really fascinating. They actually have a setup in their drawing room where her stuff is like lots of like Miyazaki and Innocent that kind of slowly moves over into his pornography. And I noticed that she was like putting little googly eyes over things when they got too close to her desk. Yeah, so the premise of this is basically you have this rabbit-headed character who's going along and then throws down, or she chews on these seeds and then spits them out, and then the panels break, and then you see each of those seeds grow into other characters that go off and do these little secondary missions, and then those kind of split off into more secondary missions, and so you get a full page, but each row is a different kind of timeline or different character's journey.
Fantastic. And so you could kind of see why the directionality might be even more incentivized here, because you need to be able to keep each of these threads so horizontally linear. The spit, like we should go back to the first page, Carson, when he spits. So we've got this temporary, from the back, so we're going forward view, and you can see him spitting to the right, and then we've got the spit traveling the same direction too. I mean, that's just so strong. Like the directionality is just super strong. Is it?
And then the spit here like keeps moving, and then you plunk in, and also some of it lands here, and you plunk in.
Right. And the villain here, does the spit grow into that thing on the top, or is that thing coming for the spit?
Oh yeah, I think that's the spit.
It like morphs the tree, it looks like. And then this grows up into some little plant at the bottom there. Oh, and the pig comes along and is going to eat it. I got to get a hold of this, because I've seen part of this in like a Best American Comics and thought it was amazing, but it didn't have the whole thing. I'm going to have to try and find this before everyone goes searching for it. And then here, Sean, you get some like antagonistic directionality for a second.
Right.
Is that, can we coin that term, antagonistic directionality?
I like that. This is an interesting thing, and I like the bottom right thing of the actual arrow pointing, like this is the way this character is going.
Yeah, and then they have to reestablish like they fought against it, and then they've like taken off. But at first they're setting up, I don't know, I'd have to read the rest of the story, but it looks like they had off in the opposite direction of this character.
Right. Or it's a surprise to be coming out from behind the tree, and so that's why it's the opposition direction.
Yeah, but I guess it breaks up things nicely a little bit to not have everything be in lockstep and going always this direction, to have a little back and then forward.
Right.
Well, and this remains super strong, like headed to the right, but these kind of meander a little bit more. So I think as it's setting up that like multiple storylines, I wish we had more of this to look at.
Yeah, I should figure out and find it for a future episode, because if I'm remembering right, at some point there's actually a map that is kind of a down view of it, and it shows where everything in the story happened along the map.
Yeah, because I have a feeling like, okay, this character's riding along and spits kind of on the side or back of that tree, and that's where that grows out, and then it pops out. And then I'm assuming this arrow down here is maintaining this direction. The camera's just shifted. So even though there's going to be forward motion, we're not to understand that it's the same forward motion. So I think that's a smart move against it to show it's headed off to the left or the right of this character.
when this came up with Ken, one of the things that I was sort of puzzling out verbally, and I was worried I was going to drive our discussion into the ditch, because I don't even know if Ken has any interest in video games or anything. I mean, some, but this is a little different. I was just wondering where that side scroller thing came from, and specifically, like I was thinking about like the evolution of like the Mario games. The first time that Mario appears, you've got him in Donkey Kong, where he can go sideways, but he's always traveling up. And then the next time he comes in Super Mario Brothers, you've got him as a side scroller where he's traveling from the left to the right the entire time. And that, that is just so now ingrained in there. But it seemed to me, just thinking about it, like if you live in a society in which your reading direction is already established as up to down or right to left, and some combination of the two, and your comics read right to left, how do you arrive at a side scroller that goes left to right in opposition to that? And how does that feel as a native reader the first time you're playing it,
Yeah, because I was thinking Western movies might be the best guess for where that. I'd be interested in animation if that holds on in the same way in Japanese animation.
Well, and then when we were just looking at the music notation comic, I was wondering, that's where we were like, okay, let's save it. But I was wondering, is musical notation in countries that read right to left, does that run left to right? Like if I went to Israel and I don't know, there's a really good Israeli drummer that I follow on YouTube. Maybe I'll ask him.
Yeah, for economic reasons, I would be very surprised if it was flipped, because people, it's coming out of a singular tradition that populated itself all around the world, written music, notated music in that form. So you would think people would be trained in a sort of central kind of way that's not really adapted that much.
Huh? Do they read a different direction in Israel? Because all my whole connection with Israeli comics is the Hanukkah brothers that I know, and they do comics for the American market that reads just like American comics.
Yeah, they're really good too. I really like them. But no, Hebrews read right to left, just like Japanese. I would assume, like with Japanese and Chinese music, it's such an own musical system. And I know like Indian music is very different in the way that they count time and stuff like that. Like they have the takadadimi, like that kind of stuff. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4,
Sure, but the notation system is basically unrelated though. So that's not like, if you play an instrument in the sort of like Western classical tradition, I think that you are reading in the Western classical tradition. I mean, if you play like a bunch of flute repertoire or something like that, all of the dynamic suggestions are in Italian. You don't read it in English. It's like it's just the canned notation system. I mean, maybe we're just more flexible than I think, and the real issue is like what the accepted reading is inside of the thing. Because I mean, obviously, like all of us have read unflipped manga. I mean, how many pages did it take the first time that you did that before you didn't notice what you were doing anymore? I mean, I probably read 300 pages before that just was okay with my brain.
I always get to the point where I will forget I remember when I was younger, basically forgetting what direction things go because I was used to reading so many unflipped manga. So I'd pick up a comic and just be kind of, which side does this one start from?
Yeah, the weird pre-bias that I've got from manga is if I pick up a black and white American comic, my eye starts going right to left. But if it's in color, for sure, I'm reading left to right. Like that is a strange thing because I have been reading a lot more manga lately. That seems to be, but I don't remember there being too big of a like uptake period. I don't know.
Huh. Where do you guys fall on the idea that I remember Paul Pope always talking about manga being deceptively like comics, but not comics?
How is it different?
I think a lot of, I mean, it might just be like a genre thing where it's like a superhero comic and an Eddie Campbell comic are such totally different animals that manga, I guess, isn't that different from that. But I like the idea of it kind of secretly being a different art form. You know, I mean, there's things. I'm doing a big 2-page fight scene in a comic I'm doing right now, and I was looking up examples of that in manga, and I realized that a lot of manga stuff is paced different. That it happen. You don't get the like Justice League fighting the Avengers giant action scene as often as you do. Like there's stuff in Berserk, you know, obviously where there'll be like a giant. And I was finding Berserk and Bastard were the two things where you could find these giant action scenes. But I feel like oftentimes if you're reading like an action manga, they'll try to they'll break it down more by panel as opposed to one big image.
Well, and even in Berserk, if you do have the big battle scene, it's going to go on for like 20 episodes of the story, whereas like the JLA thing is going to wrap up in the issue.
Well, there's something about the rhythmical nature of it though too, you know, especially like giving it a staccato feel seems like something that is more, you know, it gives you the punctuated experience, whereas you're right, you almost never see the like suspended time. Here's a single giant image that contains as much as 15 minutes worth of time, where everybody's having like conversations with each other simultaneously. And yeah, it seems like generally if you're going to see a double page spread in like a, you know, men's Japanese comic tradition, it's going to be a single moment, like a punctuated, you know, tiny slice of time. What's the name of it's untranslated. It's by the guy that did Golden Boy. Is a sequence where this guy gets, finds out that he's going to find out whether he got accepted to the school that he applied to or not. And it's a famous 14-page sequence that's nothing but double page spreads of his face, and it's like and then like everything melts around him, and then like the last page is like his name not on there, you know, and it's like the 14 pages take place in probably, you know, 3 seconds or something. You just see it's like, you know,
that's fascinating. It always makes me think of the Dave Sim Cerebus peeing issue.
Yeah. So we stole that. I misunderstood what you're talking about, Brandon. I thought you were talking about the general. You're talking about the big like 2-page spread that shows like the whole fight all at once.
Yeah, like the George Perez stuff, you know, where it's
yeah. I was thinking more about just the general speed of storytelling.
Yeah, well, there's something interesting that happens too with spreads. I always think about like, you know, if you look at like a Robert Kirkman comic, he almost does his full page images and spreads more manga than Western comics. Like it'll be a character's face, just big, being like he said what, you know, where I mean, certainly the way that I use 2-page spreads is I want the reader to linger there more. So it'll be like a, you know, a big panoramic thing of backed up, like, or, you know, it'll be like you do like an action sequence that's just for like, you know, it's a car jumping off a thing for an explosion, but really rarely for me, or almost never have I done it just to like punctuate a dramatic moment.
In Prophet, when you were writing Prophet, you had a few that maybe would qualify as the like long time, like several things are happening at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the ways that I use it. Yeah, I have, as you're saying that
I pulled up an example of that. Oh wait, we got a more interesting image from Brandon. Okay.
I just have a poster I haven't hung on my wall yet. This Farrell Dalrymple's big Prophet spread, which is really beautiful. I was looking at this because I'm doing a big fight scene, and I was looking at the composition on this, and I was like, oh, Farrell really did it up with this, like, you know, kind of 1-point perspective spaceship here. And I was like,
yeah,
you can't just rip that off.
Could you call him up and tell him to quit being so good?
Oh, I will. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's hilarious. He's one of those guys, and this is really like kept my ego in check. He's one of those guys that is just like really he's really hard on himself, and he's just like, you know, I think he knows he's good, but I don't think he knows how good he is, you know.
I saw a tiny like 2-inch painting that he did of a fox in a like, you know, loose chunky brush style, and it just was like, I can't believe this guy can paint as well as all the other skills that he has. I mean, it's just it's a monster.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane. And the nerve that I had, because I always think about kind of coming up in the my early 20s with guys like him and Tomer Hanuka, who I mentioned before, and James Jean and Tom Herpick and all these guys that like now, like 20 years later, I'm looking at their stuff and my stuff 20 years later, and I'm just like, I had a lot of nerve just like talking to these guys about like, here's how you could fix this drawing.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it was going every which way, right?
Sure.
Yeah. That, I mean, I don't know. There's a vivacity to a group like that I mean, I think it has benefited all of you, because there is a chunk that came out of that of just, you know, you kind of defined a generation, so it's got that energy.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was a fun time.
Feral Spread has got some directionality too, in a more modern video game sense, right? That's the immersive. You're falling into the image.
Yeah.
Sense. This is sort of the equivalent of the, you know, I don't know. Maybe I've got side scroller brain, and he's got 3D. You know,
the James Bond game. Yeah.
Oh, Goldeneye.
I'm definitely stuck on side scroller because I never moved past the Game Boy. So that, like, where you got to control the character and the camera at the same type of video game fucks me up so bad. I can't do it.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's always weird when I was watching some of the Halo TV show, and it's interesting they have sequences in there that are just exactly the video game. Yeah, it's weird when something, I guess video games and film kind of are meant to kind of copy each other already.
Yeah. So going back to your question about Paul Pope's statement about manga being different, I hate when my students come in and they're like, oh, I read manga, but I don't really like comics. And I'm like, it's comics, like it's just different. So I would say no, there's still comics, but I think he is pointing out to like a level. And I think American and Western comics are sophisticated in different ways. Like I think there's type of formal trickery that like Dave does in Cerebus that you don't see as often, or at least not in the manga that's been translated. But there is a sophistication with like mood and time and those kinds of things that the more I read, I'm like, this is a very different language, but it's using all the same tools, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of one of the downsides of the mainstream superhero comics being kind of so hand-holdy in their storytelling, is that it kind of trains the reader to be less curious oftentimes for weird storytelling tricks. And so that maybe that's an advantage of manga being so popular, is it certainly like slows you down. Like something I was noticing reading that Chainsaw Man manga is I was like halfway through one of these Takoban books, and nothing had happened yet. And while I'm working on the comic that I'm doing now, it's like I'm on page 30, and I'm just like, okay, has enough happened in this yet? And in this thing, the first 30 pages are like, you know, prelude.
And it's but like I read manga faster.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go boo 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 boo, and I'm done with it really quick. But I still feel like I've had a more slowed down, intimate experience with the story. And of course, that just like, yeah, I'm gonna have to read like this many of them to get as far in the story. Sure. But it's a really weird, like fast intake with an impression of stillness and slowness that I've just been thinking.
Like I was thinking, Masamune Shirow with his Appleseed and stuff. Like I feel like he paces more like an American.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's absolutely
Akira,
a reason.
A bit.
Yeah, Akira's almost in the middle, I'd say, but yeah, there's something there. Because he'll still take, you know, quite a few pages to do a fight scene or something.
Okay, so I don't know if we've solved the question here. Let's get a vote, okay? Let's get a vote from you guys.
Well, wait, let's bring back in though. Let's shout out Eric D, because Eric D, one of our subs, posted a really interesting answer to your question that I think you saw. But he said,
Yeah, go ahead.
He said, Dr. Peter Walker of Lancaster University did a study that concludes our brains have a left to right bias in regards to objects or beings depicted as moving. No such bias exists, and the same objects are depicted as stationary. This has been used to explain a number of general design choices that seem arbitrary, such as why Mario is going left to right. No idea of the veracity of the study or if it's been investigated further. And also, we'd have to look it up to see if that was only done with left to right speaking, but it's interesting.
That was my first thought. Is I think I replied to him that I want to read the abstract. So here we are talking about it before I've done that. But what I want to specifically know is what's the cultural background of the people that they studied, what's the art background of the people that they studied, and whether those two things affect that bias. I believe that there's a bias. I have no doubt, and it's very interesting that it would be linked to motion. That makes a lot of sense when you think about the type of eye tracking that your eye does when you're reading, especially the faster you get as a reader. This is just this sort of lulling. This is why people read themselves to sleep, is because this type of tracking is very easy for us to do, and it's hypnotic. And the more that you've done it, the more that just brings you into sort of the same state that you're going to have when your eyeballs are actually closed. But I would really be. I need to read that.
We're gonna have to do an episode about that with an expert. There's another one that I responded to him with that came from one of Anthony Wachulis's pieces, and I'd have to look up which neuroaesthetics article he was talking about. But he said there's a strong compositional bias for, we have an object that we have like a legitimate face for. So like this one, this is the front, and it even has a tail, right? So compositionally, people are going to be much more comfortable with this here than they will with it here. And like you can see it just
like it's
but if I do this,
it's fine again.
It's fine again. And then if I do this, it's uncomfortable. And the speculation, if I remember correct, was that as an animal, evolutionarily, we don't want to like, we'd rather have a wall behind us with the ability to see what's in front of us. That was just kind of their evolutionary. Whereas here, you're like, not only are you in a corner, but like you have no idea what's behind you. And that's a directionalist thing. But I wonder if there's some kind of explanation like that. Because immediately it becomes, and it's stupid. It's like a tape measure, but you do it with the shoe or anything.
It has a nose.
Say that?
Oh, it has a nose. That's the
thing.
That
And so you always want more space in front of the face of an object than behind it in a composition, even if I have it like here.
Well, but he's a painter though, so he's dealing with a single image. But for me, when you bring it all the way to the edge, what I'm seeing is that it's about to leave. That is a tape measure that's ready to party somewhere off the page. And in fact, the closer you get it to that edge, the more uncomfortable it is, because you start to get that tangent as well. All of a sudden you've got extreme area of focus. I mean, to me, that it's not a stronger or weaker composition. It's just an more active composition. Like that right there is the most active like configuration for the measurer, because it's gonna leave, you know.
Well, it's more irritating, right? It draws more attention and it's more active. So usually, when you're making a single image, you don't want the thing in the bottom right or bottom left to be visually irritating. On a comics page,
when it's contemplative,
on a comics page or even in a book, I think you can do that more because you can lead to the next one. And so you have local composition and then meta or global composition of the page or even the book. And I think we have more flexibility with composition than a painter does. But he's an interesting guy in terms of composition, because he doesn't buy into most of the rules. He's looking for those deeper, like kind of evolutionarily responses. But that will be another. We'll have to get some more experts on, like we got for the neuro guys, neuro-ophthalmologists.
Any other thoughts on directionality, Brandon?
I mean, it certainly has me thinking. It's. I mean, as soon as I feel like, I think I said before already, as soon as I think of a rule in comics, I can try to think of. My brain immediately goes to, how do we break this? I was thinking about kind of the manga versus comics thing, how differently newspaper comics start to read for me than print comic, like, book comics. I wonder. I definitely am more interested in it. It would be interesting to hear more of the neurophilosophical reasoning behind it all.
I mean, it's all speculation, but I mean, and that's the idea. That's the idea behind composition, anyways. Is you're not giving rules. I think that's the mistake people make, is that it's a rule. It's like, look, these are principles around which you organize space, and the principles are usually geared towards making the audience comfortable. But if you want to make the audience uncomfortable, then do the opposite.
Put a butt in there.
Yeah. That also, that's content level, Sean, not form.
It's not butt first, butt
Yeah.
towards us.
Oh,
and then
okay, I got you.
the penis getting ready to exit, creating a tangent.
This just went weird. Okay, we're calling it, guys. We'll check back in on this topic. Sean's got dick brain now.
Right, Formalist Friday nights.
If you enjoyed this installment of Formalism Friday Nights, please take some cash, unmarked, unorganized, put it into a bag, drop it off at my address, which I'll give below. Share it. Tell people that you enjoyed it.
Subject to change.
Right. Yeah, I suppose I just said drop it off at my address. It's going to be different soon. I hope you guys enjoy, and tell your friends about this really cool secret club where they only talk about comics and occasionally tape measures that look like penises.
Thank you, guys.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.